There are only two pieces of media within the last few years that have scared me. Not just unsettled or startled me, but actually deep down pit of my stomach level scared me. If I hadn't already put them in the title, they'd probably not be your first or second or third guesses. They're not horror per se. I saw Hereditary and thought that was pretty good, but it's more tragic than scary. And while The Witch is one of my favorite movies of all time, it's again not that scary to me. One of these pieces of media is an animated miniseries from Cartoon Network, and the other is a long-awaited third season of a cult network mystery show from an auteur director. Over the Garden Wall and Twin Peaks: The Return scared me more than anything else I've seen in recent memory. Rather than psychoanalyze myself to figure out why I was scared, I decided to dig into these shows to find out what it is they have in common that got under my skin. One element both Twin Peaks and Over the Garden Wall share is that they're deathly sincere. The original run of Twin Peaks was a pastiche of small-town life and network dramas that plumbed the depths of human depravity and the nature of evil.
There was a fish in the percolator.
It did so in a way that never seemed to wink at the audience like a lot of similar shows may have. The bumbling antics of Deputy Andy Brennan, the real estate machinations surrounding the old mill, and the mystery surrounding Laura Palmer's death are treated with relatively similar weight. The comedy and the feelings of the characters are to be taken seriously, and there's hardly a hint of irony. Twin Peaks gets very dark in its original run and even more so in The Return, but it's never cynical. It looks directly at humanity's best and worst and confronts those contradictions head on. Similarly, Over the Garden Wall is cutesy and whimsical, but never in a way that feels condescending or affected. The dark undercurrent throughout the show prevents it from feeling too twee or overly saccharine. There are plenty of jokes, but they're mostly diegetic, direct, and not ironic. The two shows encourage introspection and active engagement with the material, and a detached, cynical viewer will not find much to like in either. This sincerity and abundance of heart in Twin Peaks and Over the Garden Wall create a sense of security, which makes the bizarre and unsettling intrusions into this safe world all the more disturbing. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to do any psychoanalysis, but hear me out. These disturbances in both shows happen to strongly resemble Freud's theory of the uncanny. No, not the part about castration complex or Oedipal fears. Come on, Siggy, not everything's about the phallus. For Freud, the uncanny is that class of terrifying which leads back to something long known to us, once very familiar. By looking at the definitions of the German words, he defines Heimlich, at once homey and intimate, but can simultaneously mean concealed, and he inverts it for the uncanny, unheimlich, meaning strange or, alternatively, revealed. What was comfortable and well-known has come out odd and wrong, or, as he says, something which ought to have been kept concealed, but which has nevertheless come to light. The uncanny, then, is, broadly, something familiar to us, something hidden, now exposed and profoundly wrong in some way. Something in our homes that should not have been seen has been seen.
Is this in Arasna?
The uncanny locates the terrifying in the everyday, terror in the familiar. In Twin Peaks, this theme shows up throughout its run, seen in the violence that Leland inflicts on his family, Bob crawling over the couch, Leo's abusive behavior, the dark portals to other planes coexisting so close to our own. The reversed language in the lodge creates this uncanny feeling too.
When you see me again, it won't be me.
We understand what the characters are saying, we recognize the language and facial movements. It's just distinctly off-putting when it's filmed backwards and then reversed. This tension between the familiar or familial and evil is a core theme of the show, and works to uncover the everyday terror and cruelty that can be found in seemingly idyllic rural American life. Over the Garden Wall takes commonplace settings and imagery from our world, like classrooms, Halloween costumes, forests, pumpkins, and fantasy iconography, and transmutes them into strange and vaguely threatening forms, as seen with the pumpkin people, anti-whispers, and the very woods themselves, which grow and menace around the characters as if they're in a fairy tale. The vintage animation and music influence on Over the Garden Wall
How the gentle wind beckons through the leaves as autumn colors fall.
And the purposefully dated effects in Twin Peaks: The Return add to this usual but somehow unusual vibe too. The specific scenes that affected me most in these series also center around temporary homes of sorts. When Wirt and Greg enter Auntie Whisper's house, something seems off. The basket of snack turtles certainly doesn't help with the general vibe.
We came here to burgle your turts.
Auntie Whispers has large, exaggerated eyes, black teeth, and is voiced by an eerie Tim Curry.
Then no one shall be devoured alive tonight.
She seems to be controlling another young woman in her house with a bell. The twist, of course, is that Auntie Whispers isn't the one causing trouble. She's actually trying to keep the evil hidden within the young woman, Lorna, at bay. Either way, there's something monstrous hidden within this house that should not be seen, and yet they stumble upon it and help release it. Lorna's transformed shape literally haunted my dreams. In Twin Peaks, Judy, or the flickering faceless creature in the glass box that I'll call Judy here, scared the hell out of me, and she too intrudes on some sort of personal space. Sam is tasked with watching this box, which appears to have been set up in some expensive loft in New York. He and Tracy decide to ignore it for just a moment, and in that time, Judy shows up, twitching and half-transparent. She escapes the glass and encroaches on their space, a place that Sam is seemingly pretty well acquainted with, and kills them both. Judy's form, much like Lorna's, ties into another aspect of the uncanny. Freud posits that one characteristic that evokes the signature uncanny feeling is an inability to tell if something is actually human or not. Freud says, quoting Jentsch, "The uncanny is evoked by leaving the reader in uncertainty whether a particular figure is a human being or an automaton. This uneasiness is often felt in real life around corpses and very humanoid, realistic robots."
Haha.
While not automatons, Judy and Lorna border this line between human and aberration. Many other characters in The Return border this line as well, from obvious examples like the Owls and the Arm, Philip Jeffries and Nido, to figurative notions of humanity seen in The Woodsman and Sarah Palmer. They appear mostly human, but moments of monstrosity leave us wondering whether appearances can be trusted. Pumpkin people, the beast, the frogs, and animal students straddle these physical and metaphorical lines between human and something else as well. Anyone in Over the Garden Wall or Twin Peaks could at any time be harboring some spirit or dark secret that could spill out at any second. The uncanny, according to Freud, is also concerned with the idea of a double in every shape and degree. The multiple Coopers in The Return are one obvious example of this, but there are others as well. Laura and her cousin Maddie in the original run are nearly identical. There are even more non-literal doublings: the Double R Diner, Twin Peaks, the two Sheriffs Truman, the two lodges, and the resemblances between the different generations of Twin Peaks residents. The show frequently uses mirrors, overlays, and other devices to rhetorically double characters or locations. In Over the Garden Wall, the doubling is more reflection than recreation. The places that Wirt and Greg visit are often filled with people and symbols taken from the real world, albeit slightly skewed. Greg's frog mirrors the frog people on the ferry. Wirt's school friends transmute into a classroom full of animals. Jack-o'-lanterns form their own town and hold a harvest festival. the unknown itself is a sort of dark fairy tale reflection of the real world. Doublings, whether literal or figurative, point to yet another element of the uncanny. This uncanny feeling can be created in life and in media by a recurrence of the same situations, things, and events.
It is happening again.
Freud uses the example of repeating numbers. Say a couple on vacation have booked hotel room 44, then later find their dinner bill to total $44, and their trip home will be on flight number 44. Although these recurrences are total coincidence, our minds can't help but find a pattern and attribute meaning to it. Deja vu evokes this uncanny repetition in the same way. Although this specific element of the uncanny doesn't appear much in Over the Garden Wall, it's basically the entire central theme of Twin Peaks' third season. It's even called The Return. The series itself is returning after 25-ish years off the air, and the central conflict is coming along with it. Nothing is quite right, though, in this return. Dale is stuck in the lodge. Dougie looks like Dale but can't quite remember himself. Characters from the original series come back and conflicts play out once again. The lodges, Bob, a mysterious murder case, etc. Cooper's whole mission near the end of the season is to repeat Laura's past but find some way to stop her murder this time. He goes back to her house, but nothing again is right. It's not what he expects. The tension slowly builds, the uncanny feeling growing in the characters and in the audience. Cooper dismays at the end, finally realizing that he can't change the past.
What year is this?
As Laura's scream is heard once again. Recurrence also happens with events contained just to the third season. One of the Meacham brothers has a dream about Dougie bringing a specific cherry pie to their meeting.
Is that a cherry pie?
And then it happens in real life just as in the dream.
Cherry pie!
Dougie repeatedly wins jackpots at slot machines, each time shouting the same, "Hello!" Cooper travels through outlets more than once. Numbers appear and retreat. The woodsman and Nido move in a repeating pattern. We see them do the same actions forward, shudder backward, then jitter forward again in a very disorienting, uncanny display. Freud argues that part of the reason that the uncanny has such a profound effect on us is that it taps into part of our consciousness that we often try to suppress, the kind of magical thinking that lurks at the edges of our thoughts. Like, maybe those repeating numbers actually do mean something. I always suspected ghosts were real, etc. For Freud, these doppelgangers and intruders of the everyday that make up the uncanny show us the workings of forces hitherto unsuspected in his fellow man, but which at the same time he is dimly aware of in a remote corner of his own being. The darkness that we secretly suspect lurks in others finally reveals itself, surprising but somehow always kind of expected and familiar. Twin Peaks and Over the Garden Wall's figures of the uncanny do much the same. We suspect something bad is coming, and then it does. We want to trust other people, but something tells us maybe we shouldn't, like ladies transforming into flying monsters or a living room becoming a personal hell. Or maybe vice versa, those pumpkin people are actually pretty nice despite their initial creepy appearance. Both of these shows allow us to dabble in the bizarre uncanniness, let us live in that spooky liminal fantasy for a brief period, and offer up different ways of evoking those feelings. We can find a sort of rush and joy in the uneasiness since we know it's fictional. We know it'll end with no real danger or damage. Much like true horror media, this uncanny feeling acts as a catharsis that just can't be found elsewhere. Not to mention, Twin Peaks: The Return and Over the Garden Wall are just really, really good, too. If you haven't seen either of them, fall is the perfect season to dive right in. So to Judy and Lorna, to Lynch and Mikhail, and everyone who worked on these two exceptional shows, thanks for the nightmares. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you like my content, go ahead and subscribe. Leave me a comment about any other examples of the uncanny that you really like, or anything I maybe missed in those two series. You can follow me on Twitter at Radis Sordidus or at the Jack Saint parody account, BBQ Saint, or if you'd like, you can throw $2 to my Patreon, which is super helpful.